Welcome to another edition of Everybody Hates Cleveland, the podcast. I am your host, Jim Pete, joined today. Do you like how I say that, Mike, every time like it's going to be someone different?
Yeah, I mean, I keep hoping it's going to be someone different, but it's still me, unfortunately for everybody else.
I look on the screen and I'm like, you're looking so hopeful. Like, who is it going to be today? Oh, shit, it's me.
Darn it. So, I also want to point out, do you have, a gray goatee going right now?
Yeah, do you like – so here's what's great about growing a goatee after – not having grown it in a while. You never really know what you're going to get in your 40s. Well, this is what I got. I got all white, and I'm not shaving it off just because of that. So,
wow,
this is my Cavs victory goatee. This is what happens when you're a Cleveland fan. It should now be brown, right? Since we have a title. Hey, this is our first championship podcast. We don't have to whine anymore. Well, we're Cleveland Indians fans, so I suppose we could whine about that.
Yeah, so I do find with the Cavs title and with how well the Indians are playing, there's a certain disreality to fandom right now that I don't understand. And it is I think there's notably, even for myself, who's usually really optimistic about the organization and where they're going, it's notable to me that it's really hard for me to just be completely content with success. I'm well, we won today, but Michael Martinez hit second, damn it. I really want to make a big deal about this. And part of me.
Go ahead.
Some part of me is that's important because when you succeed with a bad process, eventually you'll fail with that same bad process and you still have to make the same changes. But also just shut up and enjoy the game when we hit 4 home runs in one inning.
Michael Martinez doing good things. I mean, Lonnie Chisenhall went 4 for 4 today. I mean, what kind of world are we living in right now? It's a good one. We don't lose anymore. See, and then here's the Cleveland fan in me. I literally think this today. Well, what happens if we don't lose for the whole rest of the year? What happens if we win? Oh, great. Then we are Golden State. These are the weird things that go through my head. But needless to say, the Indians are 9-0 over their past 9 games. They have beaten the Tigers all 9 times they've played. It's been fun. You know what? To be fair, if nothing else happens good this whole entire season, the fact that we're 9-0 right now against the Detroit Tigers, that alone makes me gleeful. I mean, Miguel Cabrera is like a little purring kitty. We've made them little purring kitty cats. And what do you think today Kyle Ryan is saying? Kyle Ryan, who we're hot right now, and we're going to stay hot. Real smart. Real smart, Kyle Ryan. Kyle Ryan, this one's for you. I guess I'm drinking my beer right now. Thanks. I'm getting cocky, man. How do you like that? Cleveland is cocky. Oh, gosh, what's going to happen? I don't know. We live in a weird place.
Don't you love when some rando bullpen guy runs his mouth? It's always some random bullpen guy who's may or may not play in the entire series. And he's yeah, we're on a run. That's right. I've been playing with a squirt gun in the bullpen, and it has been a blast.
I didn't know Kyle Ryan was a major league player. I heard Kyle Ryan today, and I thought, is he related to Paul Ryan? Probably better that he plays for the Tigers and isn't related to Paul Ryan, but that's for another podcast. Maybe not. I don't know.
No, it's for another one.
All right, let's run through some numbers, Mike. Let's just talk a little shop. The Indians are 9-0. I don't have the standings up, but going in today, they're 5 games up. I don't know what Kansas City did today. What did they do?
They won. Still 5 up.
So we're 5 games up. It's June. It's early. I'm not going to forget that, but it's June 26th. We're almost to July. We're almost halfway through this bad boy. They, of course, have swept the Tigers up to this point. Their starting rotation, Mike, has been absolutely spectacular. 2 complete games, 1 a complete game shutout. in the past week. Of course, Carlos Carrasco with the complete game shutout. Trevor Bauer looking great. Danny Salazar, maybe the worst start of the whole rotation over the last stretch of 5, and he actually looked pretty good. I mean, everything's clicking. Offensively, you mentioned the 4 home run inning today. The power production has been spectacular over the 9-game stretch. Juan Uribe, of all people, has 5 home runs during that stretch. Francisco Lindor, 3. Of course, Napoli's playing well, hitting the ball, hitting power. We're getting power from all over the place. We have a triple run the other day that bled into throughout the series. Position-wise, we're seeing the outfield looking fairly stable, which is insane because we probably won't talk a lot about Michael Brantley today, which is great because we're playing great without Michael Brantley, which means we get Michael Brantley back. We can't. Well, I don't even want to talk about that because we don't know when he's coming back. Everything seems to be clicking at the right time, except for perhaps the pen. But thankfully, maybe this is, again, we talked about this last week, Mike. This is really what we were looking for, I think, and this is what the front office was looking for this year. Rotation that really kind of nullifies Francona's mistakes with the bullpen because they pitch so deep. So, over this 9-game run, Mike, what are your thoughts? Like, I mean, obviously, if you look at the metrics of it all, there's going to be some balancing out to all of this. But, are we looking at a hot streak? Are we looking at this is who they are? I think we've kind of been hinting at that all year, but it seems to me to be a little too much too soon almost. Is this team the best team in the American League? What are your thoughts?
Oh gosh, there's so many questions in there.
This is my new thing. It's my new thing. I say I'm gonna ask one question and I pepper you with 12 and we forget half of them by the time you answer.
I know, and half the time I want to just go in a weird direction on my own because I'm just a pain in the butt to have on podcasts. So I'm I really want to talk about my own thing. What question can I use to get there? So that's a really useful adult tool. But no, I think I want to talk about banking wins first. And so I think that's really important, which is to say we're now 14 games over 500. If the Indians play 500 baseball the rest of the year, 500 flat, they play mediocre baseball the rest of the year, they have 88 wins, 88 and 74. And it takes a lot to convince me that 88 wins isn't going to win the American League Central right now, because we've seen these teams when we played them and annihilated them, except for the Twins, of course, and, they're pretty far gone. They should probably be relegated to a different league, but that's another creative conversation. But, we've seen these teams. We've seen the White Sox, we've seen the Royals, we've seen the Tigers, and these are wildly flawed rosters that it's really tough to convince me that they're somehow going to win 90 games. I think that's a tough sell for me. And so the Indians have to go 500 the rest of the year to win the division to me. And that's an awesome position to be in. And I think they'll be better than that. So, I'm just really happy that we've banked that. And that's why our, projections on Fangraphs and Baseball Prospectus both have us at over 91% to win, to go to the playoffs this year, and about 80% to win the division. I don't know. The offense is so crazy. I thought the offense was going to be above league average this year, but I wasn't necessarily right about why it was going to be above league average, which is cool. That's great with me. I wasn't right about it. It's fine. I'm still really happy about it. I thought Tyler Naquin would be a pretty solid big league offensive player, better than people thought. I didn't think he'd drop a 270 ISO for the first 3 months of the season. And if someone did, they're lying to you. I didn't think Rajay Davis would suddenly realize he could still steal 20 plus bases in the first half in his mid to late 30s. Once again, if you saw that coming,
second in the bigs, man. He's second. I had no, and this is me. I knew he was stealing a lot of bases, but I'm kind of flashing through the leaderboard, a couple days ago, and I'm like, why is Rajay Davis second? How'd this happen, and how did I not really know that? It's crazy. There's so much. I'm sorry, keep going. I just, it's incredulous, this whole conversation.
No, I mean, I think that's a lot of it to me. You know, Naquin and Davis, I always was you and I both we patiently drove the Jose Ramirez train, and we're finally getting to enjoy this party, and it's a delightful one. And he's slid off a little bit for the last month, but he's still, you know, he's going to be a guy who hits 280, good OBP, steals some bases, a little more power than people thought. So he's been a ton of fun. But, you know, I think you made a good point. We've talked about this a lot. You know, I think we're 14 games over 500. We're in command of the AL Central, and, you know, one of our 3 most valuable offensive players has played like 10 games this year. And I hated it when Shapiro used to say, oh, you know, this guy's coming back from injury. That's like a midseason acquisition. That's like a midseason trade. Drove me crazy. And he used to say it about calling up prospects, guys who'd never played in the bigs before. It's like, well, this is our trade, you know. We're calling up Asdrubal Cabrera. And sometimes it worked out. But Brantley, if you get him back healthy in late July, I mean, this is a lineup that's already pretty deep in terms of putting up quality at bats.
They're buying him. They're buying Mike. They're buying him freaking time. I mean, I think our big worry was that by the time he came back healthy, we'd be down. And they're buying. I mean, this feels like benching LeBron like halfway through the third quarter because you're winning by 30. Like that, they're buying him time. They got the 5-game cushion. And what this does is, in a worst case scenario, you've bought him another month. I mean, you've got the All-Star break in the middle. Like this could legitimately be Brantley getting healthy for once.
Yeah, I mean, I know we're both like really concerned, especially when he's getting constant sort of second evaluations, which is never a good sign. But yeah, I'm so excited about this team, and I'm really excited when I get to forget about Brantley. And I've been doing that for the last like 3 or 4 days. You know, I'll watch this team, and they look really complete to me. I mean, they're not complete, but they look really, really good. And I'll get to like the 6th inning, and then I'm like, oh my God, Michael Brantley's not playing. Like it takes me a long time. And that's never what I would thought. Like when Carrasco was injured and missing starts, you knew, like I felt it every week. When his turn would come and we'd see Cody Anderson or somebody else in that slot, you know, we'd see it and we'd feel it. And I'd say, oh my heavens, Carrasco's out. But now I'm just sort of sitting here like, oh, okay, you know, Brantley's out. All right, whatever. You know, and hopefully, you know, he really deepens the team, and I think kind of raises their ceiling. You know, you get him healthy and don't really lose anybody significant the rest of the way. I mean, it's the best team in the American League, and there isn't really any question about that to me.
So my intrigue with this team is the difference between last year's team to this year's team. And if you just kind of on paper look at the differences up to this point on June 26th, you've got Lindor, the obvious difference. You've got Napoli, Uribe, Naquin. You know, I think we've had a conversation where the team from 15 is not that different from the team from 16, but it actually quite is. And then you look at the rotation, you're looking really at Trevor Bauer and Josh Tomlin, plus a considerable amount of more consistency from Salazar, who's arguably one of the best pitchers in American League right now. And, you know, Kluber looking very Kluberish in his last start, having moments where he's continuing excellence over the past 3 seasons. And Carrasco, maybe the worst of the 5 starters, but then coming through with a complete game shutout in the midst of all that. So much for worrying about him coming off of injury. So you look at the differences in the players, and I want to start with Lindor. And I know we kind of bang this drum a lot, but I think, you know, if you just look at Lindor, hey, by the way, let's get him in the All-Star game. We got, I don't know, 5 days left, maybe vote, just getting it out there. But if you look at it just like this, like Lindor kind of washes out Brantley's absence. We'll get into the other reasons why. But Lindor, again, we talk about this a lot, but Lindor is kind of that steadying factor on this offense and defense, Mike, don't you think? And maybe throw Napoli in there as well. I'm thinking behind the scenes mostly. But to me, when you look at all these different guys, they're all contributing a different little piece. But the guy who, to me, seems to be the anchor, who really has been the anchor of this team since he came to the club a year ago, and we talked about this in our last podcast with him being the leader, is Francisco Lindor. Offensively, power has been consistent throughout the year, and he's not leading in home runs, but he's got 10 already, and my God, that surprises me. I'm surprised. And you know me, I'm the offensive guy with Lindor. I've always thought he had better offense than people thought. I'm surprised he's hitting for so much power right now. Hitting for average, getting on base, runs the bases well, plays defense well. I mean, we still don't see any cracks. Is he the anchor of this team?
Yeah. He brought a couple of things, and like I want to avoid like talking about the things I always talk about with Lindor, because I think you and I rightfully talk about him a lot, which we should. But I want to two things. First of all, he brought a sort of like here's the deal with Lindor. I love him, but for the like 80s white guy plays the game the right way, Mr. Borrington, like Lindor's got a lot of swag. Like, and also, if I was a fan of another team, I'm not sure how much I'd really enjoy Lindor. I'm not going to lie to you. I think he'd be a lot less enjoyable to me if I was like the Royals or the Tigers. I'd probably hate him. And it's really nice to have that guy, because nobody really hates Michael Brantley, because Michael Brantley is like an accountant who plays left field pretty well. He's just like, he looks like he should be wearing a suit and a nice hat. So, you know, I don't know. So I think he brings a certain chutzpah that was sorely lacking. And also, I mean, he's just like, he's the best player this team's had since Sizemore. Like it, and it's not a huge question. Like he's a 7+, you know, over the last, you know, calendar year, he's a 7+ WAR player.
And that's the great part about it. It's not mysticism. We're not guessing. We're not projecting. That's what he is. That's what he did.
And like, all respect to Michael Brantley and Jason Kipnis, but they're never scratching 7 WAR. It's just not going to happen. You know, like they're 5 WAR players. They're all stars. That's great. They're awesome. But Lindor's just a different dude. He's an MVP candidate who's going to hit 20 homers, steal 20 bases, and play Gold Glove shortstop. Like that's Hattery. But well, it's not Hattery because he couldn't play defense, so I take that back. But I don't know. I think he's special in that way. The really interesting guy to me, I don't want to act like I'm so too sourced, but I talk to a couple of people who are like in the clubhouse a lot, and even stuff you read publicly. And I think Uribe has had like a shockingly large impact on this team in so many different ways. He's someone who's stabilizing. He's fun. All the players go to him. They walk up to him. There's an aura around Uribe that you hear about. And, you know, if like the only thing, which isn't true because we've gotten a lot of production from Uribe recently and he's been perfectly solid at third. But if the only thing you get from Juan Uribe is like helping Jose Ramirez to make the leap from like, you know, maybe a 2 WAR guy to something much better than that, like that's tons of value. And I think he really has helped Jose Ramirez turn the corner, and I'm, you know, really excited about that. So I don't know. I think Uribe is sort of like the underplayed card in all of this. I think he's been huge.
Well, and I mean, one of two things are going to happen with Uribe before his unfortunate ball tapping incident. Either he was past his prime and finally tipped over the mountain and was never going to be the guy that he was, or he was going to come back to the mean a little bit. And I say a little bit, but, you know, again, if you look at his numbers, I mean, he's hit 5 home runs over his past 7-game stretch since he came back from his injury, which was a pretty severe injury on whatever page you're looking at, especially if you're a male listening to this. I just kind of hunched over myself just thinking about it. I mean, if he averages out, I mean, he's not certainly going to be the guy that's 5 home runs in 7 games the rest of the year, although that would be spectacular. And who knows, maybe this is the year when crazy things like that happen. But we know he's going to regress from this 7-game stretch. But if he's just the normal Juan Uribe, this team, again, looking back to last year, gets a massive lift at third base. Defensively, you've already mentioned it. You talked about Lindor and the fact that he's presenting numbers that put him with elite in the majors. I want to talk about Naquin because and you this is really for a serve up for you because you had mentioned wanting to talk about him earlier. You can say what you want about Naquin. You can say what you want about his defense. Obviously he's not spectacular defensively. Offensively, as you mentioned, he's been doing some things that are absolutely spectacular. During this stretch, he's hitting almost 500. Of course, he's not playing in every game, but he's showcasing speed on the base pass, not stolen base speed, but this is a guy who can extend a double into a triple. He's showing power, which was a big kind of question mark with him. You really have to start looking at, some of the AAA, what are they doing in the minors to get these guys ready power-wise, because we're starting to see some of that power generated by some of these kids. Defensively or not, it's not like he was worse than the guys we had out there. With Abraham Almonte about to come back, the big watch will be, where does he go? Does he stay in the minors with his one option left? Do they release somebody to DFA a guy like Calgill, put him on the 40-man? Do they move Michael Martinez, who I just think is going to be here for the rest of the season? I don't know. Or do they go to a 7-man pen? But Naquin's really kind of solidified the outfield in that we have a guy. We have a guy who we can plug in. Now we have a guy we can balance with Rajai Davis. Now we've got Lonnie Chisenhall, who's playing spectacular over the past 9-game stretch, where he's hitting 350, went 4 for 4 today, hitting for power. I could rip on the guy, and defensively he's as good as they come. But you go to Naquin, and Naquin's been as important as anybody on this team simply because he's a guy you can put out there and he performs. And even if he doesn't perform this way, Mike, for the rest of the year, he's done his job up to the point where Almonte comes back. And if Almonte isn't the guy, and we don't think he is, I know I don't think he is, but if Almonte's not the guy, then we still have Naquin and we have Brantley coming back, and you can still make a move. Maybe not for now. Maybe you don't have to go for a bigger name. Now, maybe you can just get a guy to kind of plug in if you need to, if Almonte's not the answer. So talk a little bit about Naquin, Mike. I know you've been kind of at the forefront of being high on this guy. You've heard my knocks on him over the years just from having seen him. Obviously, this offense can't contend. I can't imagine he's a guy who's going to hit 320 the rest of the year. But we don't need him to, do we?
No. Sorry, I'm involved in a sort of Ernst Blofeld cat situation. If you like 60s Sean Connery Bonds.
Please make sure you shift over to the YouTube channel for that one, because he does have a cute cat.
It's worth it. I promise.
We need to have a cat pod. I got my cat sitting here too. That's for another. We'll do that when we talk about Paul Ryan.
Okay. So yeah, I always prod you about like one or two things that I'm kicking around. Unfortunately for you, no. So Naquin's so weird, and I think you nailed it on the head. I remember talking to you when I was going to write a piece in the offseason about Naquin, and you said you don't really notice him out there defensively. And this is when the sort of like hubris about Naquin defense was really reaching a sort of foolish high. I think a lot of people, as it became realistic for him to be on the roster, started saying, oh, well, he's a really good defender, because they looked at his minor league offensive statistics and were like, it can't be because of the bat. That's not possible. So he must be a really good defender. So let's say he's like an above average defender, which he really isn't. And his routes are particularly horrific looking. He's someone who Jose Ramirez has played the outfield for like 30 games, and his route running looks better to me than Naquin. Naquin always looks like he's like out of position, even when he catches the ball, which is just hilarious to me.
Well, and just to kind of jump in there, and the thing that I like is I know, if you listen to this podcast, Mike and I love Jose Ramirez. We have this inordinate amount of love for this guy, and it's tough for me to judge. So, as I was on Twitter last night watching the game, seeing a guy like Adam Burke, who we both respect highly for his informational knowledge on the Cleveland Indians, when he starts, and he's not a Jose Ramirez guy, seeing him talk about better routes in the outfield and kind of being surprised by it lets me know that at the very least, it seems like Jose Ramirez is again using that. Yes, here it comes, everybody. Here comes the moment in the podcast where I mention IQ. It seems like Jose Ramirez has that baseball IQ in the outfield, and he's learning pretty quickly. Maybe this is why they didn't put him out there a whole lot in the minor leagues. I don't know. But back to you, Mike.
How come we don't have like an IQ button yet for this podcast? Like, how come you haven't like recorded yourself and you just like press a button? his IQ.
Well,
IQ.
we're not that advanced yet. Don't see now. This is going to be my next 3 days. Now
Okay.
this, I might just have to hold up a sign. I mean, that's kind of where we're at technologically speaking. But I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt your Naquin talk, but the route running is certainly a concern.
No, so I was because I had nothing better to do with my Sunday than look at like exit velo data. I was just scrolling on Baseball Savant, which I recommend people who don't want their wives to be happy with them to spend as much time on that as possible. So I was looking, and I was sort of looking for comparables in terms of Naquin's exit velocity data, and two sort of interesting comparables, both in terms of fly ball line drive, which is the most important. You want to have your highest, sort of exit velo on that, and in terms of overall average exit velo, both of those, he basically was average the same as or better than Bryce Harper and Anthony Rizzo. And I am not in any way saying that he's better than them or even on the same level. He's not. He's not that good. He's simply not that player.
But that's now the headline of the podcast.
God.
Naquin is better. Naquin is better than Harper. That's where we're going. Clickbait Central.
So I'm not in any way saying that. He's simply not as good. But the overall point of that was he hits the ball really hard, and it's something that I sort of focused on when I wrote about him early before the season, in that you can kind of look at minor league BABIPs, and if they're really high, they usually reflect that a guy hits the ball with a lot of contact authority. And so we're sort of seeing that borne out. Also, lefty hitters in progressive field do really well with power. Guys who make a lot of hard contact just do well because right field is really favorable to them offensively. And so you can sort of sneak a few over the right field corner more than people expect, I think, just in terms of the park. But the overall point for me with Naquin was he has a plus tool. Like, he has an above average tool. He makes really hard contact. And so I think the BABIP is not going to be 460 for the rest of the year, but I think he's going to have a lot of above league average BABIPs because he's relatively fast and he makes a ton of hard contact. He makes very little soft contact. He's one of the best in the league at avoiding soft contact. And so, someone who makes that much hard contact, it's just going to have success offensively at this level, especially if he's speedy enough. I don't think he's a long-term center fielder. I think he's a right fielder, fourth outfielder type, and that's fine. But I think he's someone who, in the future, when Frazier or Zimmer is manning center, is going to play 100 games with the Indians and be really, really good against right-handed pitching. And I think he's like a 1.5 to 2 WAR player. But I'm just, he's sort of made a leap in terms of, even a little bit of power. And I know we don't know what to do with that yet. And we're going to have to wait on some more sample size and see what happens. But this is someone who, you watch the games and he's adjusting. And something else we've seen adjust is his plate discipline's been getting better over the last month. And so as we sort of see a decline in that BABIP, which is ridiculous, I think we're also going to see sort of offensive value gains in terms of his plate discipline, which aren't going to balance out the BABIP decline, but are going to be good enough that he's still a good, really solid offensive player.
Again, credit goes to the Indians front office for these draft picks that they keep getting, that we're seeing from year to year improving in areas where you don't normally improve at this level. So, props to them, and hopefully this Tyler Naquin is for real. We've been talking about him as trade bait, Mike. If they need a better outfielder, Naquin, throw Naquin in the pack. He'll be a nice little, former first rounder playing good. I guess now really the only way you deal Naquin is if you're bringing back another outfielder, right? Like, he's not going anywhere. All of a sudden you have another first rounder on this team. And when you look at our roster, this is where it kind of gets fun. You've got, number 2, second round pick in Kipnis. You've got a first pick in Lindor. You've got a first pick, 15th selection in Naquin. You've got Lonnie Chisenhall in right field, former first rounder. This is a homegrown team. And then you start looking at the rotation where you've got Danny Salazar who comes up through the system. You have, and then you have a guy like Kluber who really developed his skill in our system. You have Josh Tomlin who developed in our system. You have Carlos Carrasco who really developed in our system, at least into who he is right now. We're really looking at a success story in our minor league organization really over the past 7 or 8 years, aren't we?
Yeah, it's been fantastic. Gosh. this second wave, the most exciting thing to me about the Indians getting in this position is I don't feel like they have to press to make some sort of kill move where they give up a lot of sort of assets. I think firming up the bullpen would be nice, and I want to talk about the bullpen in a little while. I don't want to talk about it. I have one small point that's totally irrelevant that I'll mention in a little while. But yeah, I think this second wave we have in terms of Frazier, Zimmer, Bradley, if you can stay away from touching that, you have not only, we can see our 2016 core now, but it's really easy to sort of blur your vision a little bit and blink and look to the future and see, oh, like we have this second core that's like Bauer, Salazar, Lindor, Zimmer, Frazier, Bobby Bradley. That's like 2 or 3 years from happening. And it's really easy to see how that transition is going to happen if they don't have to sort of sap their assets. And also Yu Chang, who I think is like I'm unbelievably high on, and I think isn't getting sort of enough love because he's like destroying A+ ball as a 21-year-old with power at short, which is awesome. But they're just, in phenomenal position. And I wrote a piece a couple of days ago about their playoff odds and sort of how they have to, make a decision about whether they want to thread the needle and sort of protect their future and, bet on this team to make the playoffs without protecting their future or not. And I think, with the sort of games they've banked in terms of advantage over the rest of their division, I think they're in a really good place to sort of make one or two smaller deals that are more lotto ticket deals. I don't want to give up anything for Jay Bruce, and he's not worth anything. But Jay Bruce has a lotto ticket deal to sort of play DH, play right field, sort of help this team. Makes a lot of sense. And then you sort of lotto ticket a bullpen arm that has a lot of upside, like Esmail Rogers a few years ago before we flipped him for Yan Gomes. You do something like that. You lotto ticket a couple of guys. I think that's something that the Indians can do with the position they're in that really protects their long-term and their short-term.
I look at Bruce and I was thinking that DH thing, and I'm shifting my attention to a guy like Brantley, and I think to myself, do you want to deal assets to get a guy like Jay Bruce as that lottery ticket, or is Brantley legitimately a guy who can come back healthy enough to hit? And if he's healthy enough to hit, you need that DH spot for him. I don't know. I mean, I look at the guys that are out there, and Charlie Blackmon hits home run. He over the 9-game stretch has 5 home runs too, which is absolutely idiotic. People mentioning him today as a possible trade candidate. The assets you'd have to give up to get Charlie Blackmon, who I shellacked in a piece I wrote last July, is ludicrous. I mean, I think that John Grimm has nailed it. The assets that would really benefit us, and Bruce may be an exception simply because. Correct me if I'm wrong. He's a rental, right, Mike? He's a rental for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I mean, he's basically worth nothing. Like
yeah, I mean, if you're giving up an Egon, and who, by the way, there is a person who thinks he is not as good as Francisco Lindor at any point, at any level, anytime, anywhere, any place, for any reason. No, he is. I don't even know if our front office knows who he is anymore. I forgot we even still had him. So did everybody else. There's a reason for that. Okay, I'm sorry. I forgot what we were even talking about. Twitter. Damn you, Twitter. Anyways, Bruce, as a rental, if you can give him up for an Egon, I think you do that, like you said. But those other guys that we constantly talk about, Antonetti likes to make moves for guys under control, and I don't know that they have to do that at this point. I think, he makes mention of Frazier, Zimmer, and I now think that they probably can curtail that, but, perhaps they're looking at their minor league system as their a way to, as you said, thread the needle a little bit, going from one window to the next. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see what they do, especially if they continue to win. I think the general consensus would be if they, maybe run into a rough patch, maybe you make a move and improve the team. I kind of think it's the opposite, Mike. I think If this team continues to win and we're sitting, mid-July, right after the All-Star break, somewhere around 20 games over, that's when you have to ask the question, because you're sitting 20 games over in this American League. Much like LeBron James in the Eastern Conference, you're thinking we have a legit shot to make the World Series. And with this rotation, if we have the offense to go up against a Chicago, a New York, who has a rotation as good as ours, we need to have offense to compensate. That's when I think you'll see them maybe look at making a big move. And when I say a big move, I'm not talking about Carlos Beltran, who is older than me. I'm talking about making a big move for a bat that might improve the team against a team like Chicago, making a LeBron move. Again, I'm sorry, I got to bring in basketball references. I know it's been a week, but come on. I mean, we're champions. Anyways, I think that's what we're looking at. I mean, what do you think, Mike? I mean, if do you think the front office looks at a 20-game lead and says we're doing fine? Or do you think they look at a 20-game lead and say, you know what? This is the time.
This is where you and I always come down in slightly different stances, isn't it? I feel like we've gotten here before. No,
well, we've gotten here before, but I don't know that we've ever actually been in this position.
I know.
This might be the first time that we actually could have a legitimate argument and actually see it play out.
Yeah, it is. It is. Now, I think the thing for me with the playoffs is we have 162 games in Major League Baseball for a reason in the regular season. You need that much sample to sort of decipher what teams are really good. I mean, you look, and sometimes that sample doesn't even succeed. You look at Minnesota right now, and that team's largely the same team it was last year that won 85 games. There's so much variance in baseball that we need such a large sample to really distinguish who's good and who isn't. And, for 10-game stretches, Michael Martinez looks like a big leaguer, even though he really isn't. But that's so my entire point behind that is the following. I think it's really hard to make team acquisitions based on winning in the playoffs, in that you never know who you're going to draw in the AL. The sample sizes are so small that really inconsequential players suddenly become playoff legends. And we see it year after year, where some guy who is DFA'd 3 times in his early 20s, signed a AAA deal, hits 2 World Series home runs. It's the Cody Ross story. It's so many other players' stories. So I think I definitely would love to bolster the lineup, and I'd love to do it on a cost efficient way. But I think going for it, to me, what's really important in going for it is going for home field. If the Indians if it's close near the end of July, getting out of that stupid 1-game wild card, you have to do that. That's when you push the chips in, because there's a lot of value. There's a lot of monetary value to them not playing in that game. They get multiple home games instead of maybe none at all. And there's a lot of sort of chance value. 5 games, randomness can bounce your way. 1 wild card game, Delman Young hits a home run against you and you're done. So to me, that's when you go in. If they feel like they need to go in to lock up the division, go for it. But yeah, I don't know. We'll see.
I think with anything, I think we'll see where they're at, and we'll see what Antonetti's looking at, who he's looking at, and Chernoff as well. Maybe they can find a hidden gem in there. Maybe they don't have to pay because nobody else is necessarily looking at that. I think probably the one area, and Mike, I'll segue into the bullpen. I know you wanted to talk about a small part of it. I don't want to get into it because we talked about the bullpen last week, and I went off. I want to stay calm. I'm in a good mood. I was nervous last week. We did that pod right before the game 7. So I'm a little calmer this week, but I still don't know that I want to talk much about the pen, mainly about how it's handled. But I think the one necessary move, whether it's internal or external, needs to be the bullpen. But I'm not convinced. I'm not convinced that any move that the front office makes will ultimately end in something desirable. And by that, I mean, how do we know how that piece that we get, how do we know how that piece is going to be used if it's not a big name? So kind of steering the ship to you, Mike, because I definitely served one up for you here. is the bullpen really as bad as I think or thought it was last week? Or are we really just looking at Mike Avila's syndrome? Are we looking at a bullpen that is so ungodly utilized in the wrong way that every player in that bullpen, from the eighth guy, and maybe I just start there, the fact that I'm talking about an eighth guy, all the way up to Allen, is overtly stressed or not stressed enough because basically, and I used this quote yesterday, and you all need to look it up because I feel old because someone actually got an email. Who the hell is Don Strock? We got a bullpen full of them because they never, ever, ever pitch. So you tell me, Mike, do we really need to go get a guy, or do we really need someone to smack Francona upside the head and say, yo, let's use these guys a little bit better because we're getting sick. And I know we're 14 games over 500. I mean, I guess ripping on Francona is not the way to go here, but he really hasn't used the bullpen that well, has he?
Oh, God. No,
and there it is. All right, we're wrapping things up. That says it all. Good God. All right, okay, I'm sorry.
No, I mean, I tweeted a couple of stats out today, not to like be one of those people who quotes his own tweets on a podcast. That sounds really snotty. But my point being, the Indians bullpen has thrown 8 innings in the last 7 days. Over the last 30 days, only 6 pitchers have thrown more than 5 innings, and they're running with an 8-man pen. And the crazy thing is, those 8 innings over the last 7 days have all been pitched by Otero, Allen, or Shaw. So 3 dudes. But the really positive thing I wanted to say, the reason I wanted to talk about the bullpen is Cody Allen over the last sort of like 2 weeks, 3 weeks has looked like Cody Allen, top 5 relief pitcher in baseball again, who he really didn't look like at the start of the season. And my biggest concern, one of my biggest concerns was sort of making sure he was back to that guy. And he seems like he is. And I think you can build. Like, you can lie your way through the 7th and 8th inning, but you can't lie your way through the 9th if you want to make a playoff run, especially with this rotation. And so with him sort of back to elite closer status over the past couple of weeks, I think his stuff has been better. His stuff has bounced back. He's getting his swing and miss and not walking as many dudes. I'm really encouraged. So I know, like, we've talked about Shaw a lot. And I think Shaw's sort of flop and why we're so pissed about the bullpen is partially just misusage. And we shouldn't pick on, I don't want to pick on Francona too much right now. It seems like a worthless enterprise. I guess my point is,
I mean, Michael Martinez hit second. He hit second. I don't care that we've won 9 games in a row. Are you freaking kidding me? Oh, sorry. I'm sorry. It's hard for me to let go of my angst. I'm a Cleveland fan. I'm old. Come on. He hit second.
So, like, the most dangerous thing in the world to me, when you have a flawed decision-making process and it works for you for a while, then when you get in situations with much sort of higher leverage, like playoff games and games that really matter, you continue to make flawed decisions. Like, you continue to make decisions based on a flawed model, which is why it seems really foolish to complain about it now, but it's something that you really have to monitor, because you're going to be really pissed off when we're playing in game 1 of our divisional series. We're facing the Texas Rangers, or we're facing the wild card team, and he goes to Shaw as the first man out of the pen in the 8th when we have a 3 or 4 run lead. The starter's at 95 pitches. Allen's fresh, and he goes to Shaw, because then you're going to be pissed about it. You might say, oh, well, it's working out for Francona now, so I'm going to let it go. But you're going to be pissed about it when it happens, when it matters, when it happens, when everything isn't going right. So which is why you should be pissed about it now, because it's, it's something you can't do. And I think they have to make a move. But I ultimately never know, Francona will say things like, oh, I'm not going to bounce him out of this role because of a couple bad games. Well, it's been a bad year. And last year wasn't great either. He was a league average reliever last year. And so I think that's sort of scary. And you can acquire whoever you want, but I think there is a really significant question as to whether, unless you acquire like Chapman or Betances or someone who's really elite who would cost the Indians way too much, asset wise, whether Francona would actually sort of like bump Shaw out of that role, which is a scary thought. I didn't want to think about.
I'm sorry. I feel like I've drug you into that, and I apologize. But I want to talk one more thing that's kind of annoyed me over the past couple of days, and to kind of move up to this point where we have to ultimately make roster moves. You've got Almonte possibly coming back. You've got Perez, whose window to return is coming soon. There's been a lot of chatter about Trevor Bauer's catcher. Why we need to keep 3 catchers, and why the only way to keep Trevor Bauer from pitching badly would be to keep a certain catcher on the roster. Now, I get it. Trevor Bauer has been known, I guess, as a head case for, I mean, there's reason for it. I mean, I'm not going to sit here and lie. Trevor Bauer has showcased some. I mean, he's not a dumb guy, but let's be honest. I mean, he's had moments where you've kind of scratched your head and thought, Trevor, what are you doing? But are we really ripping on Trevor Bauer here by saying, the only way, Trevor, that you're going to pitch good for the rest of the year is if you keep a really not so good player on the roster? I mean, is that really where we're at? I mean, can we not get Roberto Perez, who has caught him before, who knows him, who's a pretty good catcher, or I don't know, Yan Gomes, you can knock Yan Gomes for his offense, but still defensively pretty good. Pretty good, Mike. Do we really need to keep 3 catchers just for Trevor Bauer? He's not Stephen Wright. He doesn't throw a knuckleball. I don't know. Maybe we should get his mom to catch. So whenever he throws a pitch, mom can go give him a hug. Because clearly Trevor Bauer can't be good by pitching really good.
There's this fantastic Latin phrase, post hoc ergo propter hoc, which is after, therefore, because. And it's also something that we sort of have reduced in American language to correlation does not equal causation. And I kind of want to talk about with Chris Jimenez, and I want to say a few things. The first is that Bauer sort of made a dynamic usage change in terms of his arsenal starting in April when he was in the bullpen. So before Chris Jimenez was ever on the Cleveland Indian Baseball Club. That arsenal shift started to occur. And really the arsenal shift that underlies his success this year actually started, if you look back in terms of the sinker usage, back to last August and September. And so there's sort of this notion that like Chris Jimenez is a baseball game calling savant.
He caught you Darwish. Dude, he caught you Darwish, who throws 27 different pitches. The only reason why you was good, Chris Jimenez.
And it's not because both of those guys have multiple plus pitches. That's not the reason.
I'm being petty. And I don't know. I guess my thing now is to yell because I'm watching all this and I can't be the only one who's annoyed by it. I can't. Trevor Bauer is really good. Let's not forget. He was really good. He was a top prospect. Arizona drafted him first. He's good. Can we just not say, hey, Trevor, you're good? But no, let's keep 3 catchers.
Well, ultimately, I don't believe the solution where, I don't know where this gets you. If you think that Chris Jimenez is some magical elixir that Trevor Bauer needs to consume for every start, does that mean that we have to re-sign him to a 12-year contract or something to finish out Bauer's next few years? So I don't really have any time for that. I don't think that's the case. I think that Jimenez has probably done a good job catching Bauer.
Agreed.
I think he probably has.
Agreed.
Respect. I'm glad he's helped Bauer settle in, and I don't want to knock Jimenez for that. I think he's done a great job filling in. But I think that whole thing is sort of ridiculous. Trevor Bauer did not make the leap to really good major league pitcher because he called a couple more sinkers. Like, that's not what happened. It just isn't. Bauer had made that transition already. And, I think Jimenez probably has done a really good job helping him along, but that's, not why Bauer's making this leap. Baseball isn't that simple. Isn't there there's an H.L. Mencken quote that it's like, there's always a really simple and obvious solution, and it's probably wrong. There's always a really simple and obvious answer, and it's probably wrong. It's not Chris Jimenez. But see, that's sweet. I've snuck in a Latin phrase and H.L. Mencken in like 4 minutes. Like, who gets to do that?
And it all fits. It's not even a stretch. It's not even a stretch.
But yeah, I'm sick of that too. And I do not want to see Yan Gomes, Roberto Perez, and Chris Jimenez hanging out in the dugout during a weekend.
We're gonna have an 8-man pen, Michael Martinez batting second, and 3 catchers. And we're still gonna be almost 20 games over 500. And everybody's gonna say Francona is the best. Look what he's doing with a shitty roster. It's not a shitty roster. I'm kidding. I don't know.
He's such an innovator. He's an innovator, Jim. People said that you couldn't waste 11 roster spots on bullpen guys and catchers. And Francona said no. I looked at the numbers when I was at TGI Fridays last night, hitting on a 20-year-old waitress, and I came out looking great. I was doing them in crayon on the kids menu. And I realized that 3 catchers is the right way to go.
Oh man, I don't know. Hey, we're in first place. Honestly, if we have 3 catchers and we win the World Series, I will drive to Terry Francona's house and I will carry him around town in the next parade. That's what I'll do. But we got to wrap things up. We could do this forever. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to go off on a tangent. Maybe 3, but that's just the way it is. Mike, the final question of today. Actually, it was one of the 27 questions I asked you in my first question. In all seriousness, as we wrap this up today and we look at this Indians team who has definitely been playing very good baseball for whatever reason, obviously good pieces, and you can say what you want about Francona, but the chemistry seems to be there. How good is this team? I mean, the last time we were talking about 9-game streaks, we were making a run for the pennant a couple years ago. And, obviously this team is making another run like that. It seems like they're doing it easily. I mean, today's destruction of Justin Verlander, which was very pleasurable, by the way, but today's destruction of Justin Verlander, I felt like we all kind of called it at one point or another on Twitter. How good is this team? I mean, in the American, let's just look at the American League right now. I don't want to jump ahead because, we've already mentioned the Cubs and a few other teams, but how good is this team in the American League? You've got Baltimore, a couple of other teams that have, made some waves. This Indians team looks really good, Mike. I mean, how good are they at the end of the day?
They're really good. I think this rotation is like, we raved about it. And I know statistically they don't look like the best team right now, but where they are for the last month is the best rotation in baseball. And that's with Bauer clicking. When Bauer's this good and he's your 4 starter, he's pitching like a 2 or a 3 starter on a contending team. And when Bauer's this good, you're just a 90-plus win team. And, we'll see. I buy into Bauer. I think his adjustments are real. I think he's made the leap. But we'll see. I mean, there's time. When Tomlin is your 5 starter, and I think he is. I think Carrasco's back to being Carrasco again, which, Tomlin's just the 5th best starter, but Tomlin would be, a really good 4 starter on a lot of teams. Maybe better, maybe 3rd. When that's happening, that sort of depth, it doesn't take much to compete. It doesn't take much to be the best team in the league offensively. You just have to be average to above average, and they're there. The other thing I think that I want to emphasize, because I'm going off topic again because you gave me a loophole. I really want to emphasize that I think one of the things we do when we look at offenses and we measure offenses that is really good, even people who use sabermetrics, sort of advanced statistics, is we sort of always look at like ball and play outcomes or what guys do not on the base paths. And one of the things that can sort of create an artificial, increase for your offense that we don't always notice is really good base running. And it's really easy to list like, Santana, sneaky good base runner. Lindor, really good base runner. Ramirez, really good base runner. Chisenhall, really good base runner. Naquin, really good base runner. Oh, Rajai Davis is second in Major League Baseball in steals, really good base runner. And really fast, you can see like 6 or 7 guys who force things when they're on the bases and really improve where the Indians are in terms of on the base paths, which improves your outcomes when you're putting the ball in play. Which the Indians have done decently well so far. So I think their offense is sneaky good because we don't sort of input base running value enough in how we sort of evaluate offenses and run scoring. So, I think they're probably right next to Boston as the best team in the league. I don't buy into Texas at all. I think it's a lot of smoke and mirrors. I don't really think it's a particularly good roster. So,
well, so I feel optimistic, Mike, and we're going to Atlanta. We're going to hot Atlanta to play the Braves. Hopefully our next podcast, we're still talking about streaking. Boy, I just got these thoughts in my head. Like if we're still streaking, maybe we should have a podcast where we actually streak. Nobody wants to see that. Maybe we'll just talk about cats and Paul Ryan. Let's end it there.
No zipper. We're not doing that.
Well, okay. No. Can I like we don't talk about Napoli a lot. Just real quick, Mike. Like how big is he on this team? He seems to be power-wise foundational with this team. Like I want to say a lot of this power production maybe with him at the center. He's got 15 dingers this year. Obviously, he's turning into that Mike Napoli of old. He's been a pretty big deal to this team, hasn't he?
Yeah, when I was doing my baseball data dive today, I found out that Napoli was in the top 20 in exit velocity in baseball. He hits the ball really hard, and he does it a lot. He's incredibly important. I also want to note that, like, I'm a little worried. His walk to strikeout numbers are, if he sort of takes one step worse in that direction, I think, it could kind of fall apart for him, which is why I think you've seen Santana playing first a lot recently. I think Unions are a little worried about Napoli staying healthy and protecting his body because he is really important. He is a power center, and he's been fantastic. But I think one of the sneaky routes the Indians can go, and why I mentioned Jay Bruce in that lotto ticket DH role, is I think getting Napoli more rest and sort of protecting Napoli a little more is actually a pretty big deal for them going forward. And I wouldn't be surprised if they do something to address that. So.
All right. We'll wrap things up there, Mike. Obviously, as we close out this podcast, I always ask the question, so I'm going to go ahead and throw it to you. Anything that you would like to plug coming up this week from the computer of Mike Hattery, or anything else that you'd like to plug?
Coming up? That's a lot of pressure. Am I going to write something this week? That's a big question. That's a more important question. If you haven't read this piece that Brian McPeak wrote on EHC, you're one of the few people in the entire Cleveland area, I'd note first, who hasn't read it. But secondly, you should read it. It's worth your time.
Let me just kind of barge in there. Just to kind of, if you're a Cleveland fan of any sport, this really, while it's a Cavaliers piece for sure, and it talks about his day, as I read it to my wife, and I don't really read a lot of sports articles to my wife, with tears streaming down my face, Brian talks about his day last Sunday and his days after that. And it's a piece that really speaks to the core of being a Cleveland fan, especially if you're a Cleveland fan who has been longing for a title. Even if that title wasn't the one that you wanted, it's worth the read because, if the Indians ever do win, if the Browns ever do win a title, and that's the team you're looking to support, that's the piece you need to read, because I've never seen a piece catch the pure raw emotion of being a Cleveland fan than that one.
Yeah, it's unmatched. Jim also wrote what is a fun piece about Stephen Wright. I expect, partially because I'm a little sick of hearing people talk about like how Stephen Wright is the one that got away, because the Indians apparently have a core competency that we don't know about in developing knuckleballers at an elite level. But Jim does a really nice job discussing that. I wrote a piece about playoff odds. It's okay. You don't really need to read it.
Well, you do outline, though. You do in that piece outline the needs and necessity for the Indians perhaps to go out and look for some pieces. Which again, if you haven't noticed, we do have a daily piece out called The List. Make sure you check that out. That's what Mike had written. And just to be perfectly honest with you, our site is really, it seems to be on the precipice of taking off. And just get on the site, look for things that you like. I guarantee you'll see something. Make sure you read the stuff that's there and listen to the podcasts and listen. If you have anything you want us to write about, if you have anything you want us to podcast about, by all means, let us know. Shoot us an email. Leave us a comment on iTunes. That would really help us out. Please leave us a comment. Rank us. 5 would be awesome. 5 would be great. As a matter of fact, just 5. And I'm only saying that because that's all we got so far. Let's just keep the ball rolling. Check out the website. I mean, I think we're a hidden gem. We're one of the few independents left. And we're like I said, this piece that McPete wrote was fantastic. We're touching on 30,000 hits on that one alone. So make sure you check us out. And thanks for all of your support over the past couple of weeks of our Cavs coverage. That being said, we're going to wrap things up. Make sure you check out all of our podcasts. Normally Mike's the one that rants. Last 2 weeks, it's been me. Things are crazy. That's how crazy things are. And Everybody Hates Cleveland. See, Everybody Hates Cleveland. People slammed me for that name. It's starting to make sense to some of you now. Thank you and good night. Go Tribe.